Now Joel is one of the prophets that was before the Babylonian captivity. So he's speaking from a position where they are free. They have their temple. He's one that we have few details of, though. Joel's a 3-chapter book, and we don't get a lot of revelation of who he is, other than who his father was, that he was of the northern kingdom, he was a prophet to Judah. And he mentions Jerusalem a lot, he's focused on that a lot, so it's kind of assumed by some that perhaps he lived there, but it's not necessarily a fact. He brings his prophecy to a very tangible way for us. He talks about the moon, and the sun, and grass, and locusts, and puts it in a place where it's visual for us to imagine what he's speaking of, even though what he's speaking of may be completely different. When we get to the part about the locust in chapter 2, we find that it's not exactly what you think it is. We don't know exactly when this book was written, but we can presume it was about 200 years before the Babylonian captivity. The three thematic topics that we see coming from the study of this book is God's judgment upon his people, his judgment upon the Gentile nations, and the purification and restoration, the coming kingdom. We also find that the phrase, the day of the Lord, the mention of the coming judgment and the coming of Christ to Israel is first introduced to. We see it alluded to throughout the books that we've gone through, but as far as writing goes, the phrase is introduced. Now, why is judgment coming upon Israel? Why is judgment coming upon Israel? And we can even say today, why is judgment coming upon the world? I kind of shared this in the group last night, but in 2 Kings chapter 17, God gives us the answer. Now we know from the study that we just went through in Hosea that idolatry and the nation's lack of faithfulness to God is ultimately the reason. In 2 Kings 17 and verse 14, it says, "But they refused to listen. They became as impossible to deal with as their ancestors who refused to trust the Lord their God. They rejected his decrees, the promises he made to their ancestors, and the warnings he had given them. They went after worthless idols and became as worthless as the idols. They behaved like the nations around them, although the Lord had commanded them not to do that." There was an absolute act of disobedience. Verse 16, "They abandoned all the commands of the Lord their God. They made 2 calves out of cast metal. They made a pole dedicated to the goddess Asherah. They prayed to the entire army of heaven. They worshipped Baal." There was a great deal of variations in how they abandoned God, how they rejected God, but the point is that they rejected God. They sacrificed their sons and daughters by burning them alive. They practiced black magic and cast evil spells. They sold themselves by doing what the Lord considered evil, and they made him furious. The Lord became so angry with Israel that he removed them from his sight. At that point, only the tribe of Judah was left. So we see Israel abandoned God. Why has God put them off of the land? Why, in today's perspective, when you say that God has abandoned Israel, it's because that they first abandoned Him. All right, let's turn to Job chapter 1. See, I told you I was going to do that. I pre-warned you. You are without excuse. Yep, I've got a Bible out on the cover. All right. We're going to move a little forward in the first chapter to verse 15. There's a lot here. We won't cover everything, but we'll get some of the insights. All right, Joel chapter 1 and verse 15. Alas for the day of the Lord is at hand. Here we have the phrase introduced to us. The day. The day of the Lord. It shall come as destruction from the Almighty. Is not the food cut off before your eyes? Joy and gladness from the house of our God. The seeds shrivel under the clods. Storehouses are shambles. Barns are broken down, for the grain has withered. How the animals groan. The herds of cattle are restless, because they have no pasture. Even the flocks of sheep suffer punishment. Lord, to you I cry out, for the fire has devoured the open pastures, and the flames have burned all the trees of the field. The beasts of the field also cry out to you. For the water brooks are dried up. The fire has devoured the open pastures. He's looking forward to a period of time where planet Earth is going to be absolutely destroyed. As you read through the book of Revelation, you see events happening where a third of the trees are destroyed, a third of the water is corrupted. These events are happening, and later we even see the animals turn on mankind. This is the day, the coming and approaching day of the Lord. These are the events that lay out. The planet is just absolutely destroyed. Last week we talked about how in the new kingdom, the land would be a blessing for Jerusalem and a blessing for us that are there. But in this period surrounding the day of the Lord, it's going to be awful. It's going to be awful. The lack of food, the lack of water, the lack of resource, the inability to provide for oneself. The planet will absolutely be turned against mankind as mankind turns upon each other, and as Satan turns upon mankind, and as God pours out His wrath, which is in all of that, upon mankind. We're looking at an awful event in world history, but yet, at the same time, it's the prelude and coupled with the greatest event in world history. Justice comes upon the planet. Peace comes upon the planet. Renewal and regeneration comes upon the planet and the people of Earth. So this day, the day that is being spoken of is the most wonderful period and most awful period in human history. For those who are not in Christ, the approach of the King is going to be a dreadful thing. For those who turn themselves against Israel, tried to drive all of God off of the planet through the destruction of Israel, they will face Israel's true King. And that's going to be an awful, terrible day for them. The day of the Lord. Food will vanish. Famine will grip the land. There will be an absence of sacrifice and offering as the animals begin to deteriorate and disappear. There will be nothing for the priests in the house of God. In Israel and Jerusalem, there won't be the grain. There won't be the animal sacrificed. So everything is going to come to a halt in the middle of this tribulation period because of the awful events that are just creating chaos. Now, I've said before, the Antichrist is going to try to continue his rule of deception through this chaos. And of course, from the halfway point forward, there'll be less deception and more violence. But God is going to turn this planet on its ears. Now we know that Jesus even spoke of this in Matthew 24. He said there will be famines, pestilence, diseases, earthquakes in various places. John said in Revelations that the fourth horseman of the apocalypse will be given power over a fourth of the earth to kill with the sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth. You catch the last part? By the beasts of the earth. Now back in the 70s, there was a movie that came out that kind of fascinated me. It was called Day of the Animals. Now on this day, there was some kind of a solar flare or solar surge or something that made all the animals go crazy and they attacked mankind. That type of event is coming. It's not my opinion, that's what John said. It will be an unprecedented day upon planet Earth. It'll be awful. And here Joel is giving us a little picture. He's going to go into a little bit more detail, coupled with Revelation when we get into chapter 2.
What verse? What did you say about the animals?
That is 6:8. And I don't recommend the movie, but it wasn't that interesting. I recommend Revelation chapter 6, verse 8. The good order of harvest time and seed time, the things that here on planet Earth that we're able to control, and it's a sustaining thing. It's part of our self-preservation. It's something that we kind of control, even though anyone who's a farmer will tell you it's beyond their control. That's all going to be turned on its ear because of drought, because of fire falling from the sky, many, many things happening. There's not going to be the growth, there's not going to be the ability to sustain life the way we know it today. Now that's the hardest thing when studying Bible prophecy for people in our culture to realize is that our linear approach to life that says yesterday was like today and tomorrow will be like today, a little bit different, makes it very hard for us to comprehend these events coming on planet Earth, because these events change everything. We don't have the comforts, we don't have that sense of self-control, that sense of order. It's all going to go away at that point. So, and while that seems like a bad thing or a hard thing, it's actually a very good thing, because the order that's coming following that is the perfect order of the King, and that's a wonderful thing. That's what we're waiting for. That's what we're trying to represent here on Earth with our lives and the light that we have.
Did that go down or something?
Yeah, I've got too much weight on my stand. I may just have to slouch. All right. Let's go ahead and turn forward. We are skipping some things, so read through Joel chapter 1. Well, let's go to Joel chapter 2. Blow the trumpet in Zion. Sound an alarm in my holy mountain. Let all the inheritance of the land tremble. For the day of the Lord is coming. For it is at hand, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds, thick darkness like morning clouds spread over the mountains. A people come and great and strong, the like of whom has never been, nor will there ever be such after them. We're talking about an army of people, a group of people are coming. Even for many successive generations. A fire devours before them, and behind them a flame burns. The land is like the Garden of Eden before them, and behind them a desolate wilderness. Surely nothing shall escape them. Their appearance is like the appearance of horses, and like the swift steeds, so they run. With a noise like chariots, over the mountains they leap. Like the noise of a flaming fire that devours the stubble. Like a strong people set a battle array. Before them the people writhe in pain. All faces are drained of color. They run like mighty men. They climb the walls like men of war. Everyone marches in formation. They do not break ranks. They do not push one another. Everyone marches in his own column. Though they lunge between weapons, they shall not be cut down. They run to and fro the city. They run on the walls. They climb on the houses. They enter into the windows like a thief. The earth quakes before them. The heavens tremble. The sun and the moon grow dark, and the stars diminish their brightness. The Lord gives his voice before his army, for his camp is great, very great. For strong is the one who executes his word. For the day of the Lord is great and very terrible. Who can endure it? Who can endure it? So what are we talking about here? A huge army passing over the land, destruction. It's illustrating a coming military invasion. He calls for trumpets to be blown in Zion, signaling these awful events. A time of cloudiness, thick darkness, like the time of a great swarm of locusts spreading across the mountains of Israel. Millions of locusts. In Joel's day, they had this experience. In front of the army, they'll be entering a beautiful city, a beautiful place, and leaving destruction behind them. They'll be charging, scaling walls, marching in line, focused on their target, plunging through defenses without pulling back and without injury. Troops will be rushing, breaking into houses, seizing what they want. And there's a phrase used in Scripture that says, if this day is not cut short, there will be no flesh left on the earth. These events that are happening in this final battle. Joel calls this force a people, great and strong. So we need to recognize that it says like people. This is a great military force. He paints a picture of a well-trained, efficient military force marking in a straight line, and that they're doing exactly what God wants them to do. It's kind of an odd thing because of the destruction that's happening, but we understand that the pressure of what's happening through this period is forcing Israel to recognize their one true king. Forcing Israel to recognize that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, whom they rejected. So this is a very important event. Where in chapter 2 are you?
Well, basically, we're here and I had some comments on that.
Take it, Larry.
I didn't talk about
Please.
This is from, we had done Joel as a study of its own a while back. So since he's going through it this time specifically, just to follow through on the study of prophecy in general. But in this particular chapter, one of the things I had noted here in this section was a parallel to Revelation chapter 9, verses 1 through 10. Going that.
It should hold your weight.
Revelation 9:1-10, and this, of course, is John's revelation, but seeing pretty much the same thing. Then the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star falling from heaven to earth. To him was given the key to the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and the smoke arose out of the pit, like the smoke of a great furnace. So the sun and the air were darkened because of the smoke of the pit. Then out of the smoke, locusts came upon the earth, and to them was given power as the scorpions of the earth, have power. So this is a comparison. Locusts to scorpions, there's obviously a difference that we're aware of. It's talking about what we know of scorpions of the earth. Their significance to us is more than just locusts, because anyway, going on from there, let's see. They were commanded not to harm the grass of the earth or any green thing or any tree, but only those men who do not have the seal of God on their forehead. So this is different. We're talking about locusts, but they're told not to attack vegetation. And they were not given authority to kill them, but to torment them for 5 months. Their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it strikes a man. In those days, men will seek death and will not find it. They will desire to die, and death will flee from them. The shape of the locusts was like horses prepared for battle, and on their heads was crowns of something like gold, and their faces were like faces of men. They had hair like women's hair, and their teeth were like lion's teeth. And they had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots with many horses running into battle. They had tails like scorpions, and there were stings in their tails. Their power was to hurt men 5 months. Okay, so that was the section I was comparing it to, but one of the things that kind of jumps out is in verses 4-6, commanded not to harm the grass, etc. As I indicated, here's locusts, but they're not told not to harm vegetation. But comparing that back to Joel, the section we were in, chapter 2, back to there. We're looking at verses 3-11. But this is the very first thing it says in this section. It says, a fire devours before them, and behind them a flame burns. One of the things that I noticed about this parallel comparison is the fact that the word in English and in Hebrew says before them and behind them. Well, before in English as well as in Hebrew, and behind in English as well as Hebrew, can mean both place or time. Before meaning preceding, time meaning, and behind meaning following. And so the reference here and how this comes into being parallel is referencing the fact that it says a fire before and behind. Well, if you look into, we're in chapter 9 of Revelation. When we look back to chapter, let's see, where is the chapter?
Time and place, is that what you said?
Yes. Before and behind can mean before in time or before in place. Before in place is in front of you. Before in time is preceding. Behind in place is in back of you. Behind in time is following. So, in this sense, in the reference in Joel's makes it sound like before and behind is talking about place because you're talking about a moving army. But in Revelation, it seems to indicate it's rather than in place, it's in time that this happens because it's referring to fire. And anyway, that's what I'm trying to clarify here. In Revelation chapter 8, verses 1 and 2, it says, when he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. So I'm just giving you a reference point here. This is before this chapter 9. And that's verse 1. Verse 2, and I saw the 7 angels that were sent before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. Okay, so 7 trumpets. Now we jump to verse 7. The first angel sounded. Verse first trumpet, that is. And hail and fire followed, mingled with blood, and they were thrown to the earth. And a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. This happened before the locusts, before in time, before the locusts. So the locusts are told not to touch any of the green trees. At this point, it seems like there's probably no green trees to touch. They've already been burned. And then, what it says before and behind, well, what happens after the locusts? Well, if we follow into chapter 9, verses 13 through 18, the end of chapter 9, when the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before God, saying to the sixth angel, by the trumpet release the four angels who are around the great river Euphrates. So the four angels who had been prepared for the hour and day and month of year were released to kill a third of mankind. Well, the number of the army of the horsemen was 200 million. I heard the number of them. I saw the horses in the vision. Those who sat on them had breastplates of fiery red, accent blue, and sulfur yellow. And the heads of the horses were like the heads of lions, and out of their mouths came fire, smoke, and brimstone. By these three plagues, a third of mankind was killed by the fire, and the smoke, and the brimstone, which came out of their mouths. So basically what I was doing here is placing the fact that this is a parallel passage, because the fact that before and after, even in Revelation, it refers to fire before them. So as it says in Joel 2, chapter 2, verse 2, day of darkness, verse 3, the fire devoured before them, and behind them the flame burns. So this puts it in place. And then, let's see, I set a note here for Joel 2:10 and Revelation 8:12. So let's see how that applies. The earth quakes before them, the heavens tremble, the sun and moon grow dark, and the day and the stars diminish in their brightness. So that's actually, again, referring to the before. One of the other things that happened before, it says the earth quakes before them, and before chapter 9 is chapter 8. Chapter 8, verse 12 says, then the fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, a third of the stars, so the third of them were darkened, and the third of the day did not shine, likewise the night. So 8:12 and Joel 2:10, the sun and the moon grow dark, and the stars diminish their brightness. So again, it's showing the parallelism here by reference of time sequence rather than place sequence. Anyway, that was my notes that I put together at the time I had taught this previously. But it just brings into the fact that Joel is speaking of the end times as well as Revelation is.
Back to you, Greg.
Yes.
Or you look like a variety show for soon to pick this up there. So it's important when looking through Joel to understand he's speaking far future during this period where God's wrath is being poured out upon the earth. And we see this massive army described there in Revelation, also described here in Joel in extreme detail to the preciseness of this army, to the training of this army, this massive army. And we can guess who that army is in Revelation. There are certainly details there that we can draw on. All right, so he's describing these awful events that are going to lead up to the day of the Lord, the return of Christ. And then we get to Joel chapter 2 at verse 28. And we get something that is quoted in Acts. So let's just go ahead and go to it. It says, verse 28 of chapter 2, it shall come to pass afterwards that I will pour out my flesh, my spirit on all flesh. Now I'm going to pause there for just a moment because it says afterwards. So it's saying after the events that were just described, but it's also saying something else. That word afterwards is a word that can be used